I'm curious, do you have a perspective on psychedelics and psychedelic-assisted therapy?
I've said this openly before, done psychedelics, and believe that at the time that I did in my youth, it was really instrumental in becoming a stronger, more mentally stable person.
Meet Zoltan Istvan, American transhumanist, journalist, and futurist, and the man who wants to defeat death. He ran for president with the Transhumanist Party to push science, AI, and life extension. Now he's running for governor of California.
Do you have a perspective on who gets this basic income?
Well, I have a lot of different ideas on how to get the money. I have the Federal Land Dividend plan, which is 40% of the United States is empty federal land. And I believe that we should rent or lease out or even sell some of that land to pay for a universal basic income.
How far do you think we are before that tipping point?
The tipping point is going to start really accelerating by mid-2026. So by this time next year, you will be reading about people losing their jobs en masse. For example, this happened in South Korea. They recently put in an order for 1,000 welding robots. This is we're just beginning. It's not 1,000 robots. That's this year. Next year, it's going to be 20,000. And then it's going to be 2 million robots that are welding. No one's going to weld anymore.
How prevalent do you perceive actual robots being in our lives, in our homes, outside of just software, but a hardware human, kind of like the Jetsons in our lives?
There are 6-foot-tall robots that are already starting to do dishes, starting to cook. They will be out in force by the end of this year. By the next year, there will be out tens of millions of them.
Do you have this question ever in your mind? If we create a universal basic income, we support people's basic needs, that people would get lazy or people would stop producing or being useful members of society?
This is a great question because it's complicated on many levels.
Sultan, thank you so much for being on the show. I'm excited about your race to be California's next governor, but I'm especially excited to hear about your thoughts recently on the transhumanist movement, now that there's been so much evolution in the artificial intelligence space, genetic engineering, and biotech. So I'm excited to get into all of that, but I wanted to start by first learning a bit about how you got into transhumanism and your kind of early beginnings in the space.
Well, I was a student at Columbia University, and in English class, we had to write a paper on cryonics, where you freeze people to hopefully bring them back from the dead one day. And all of a sudden I realized, wow, there's a movement out there of people that want to overcome biological death, a bunch of scientists. And I thought, well, that sounds great. That could be a life goal for me. So I started looking into this. And of course, transhumanism was a movement I discovered, a bunch of people who want to overcome death. That's kind of their primary goal. And I realized that there's a group of people that I could spend my life, join with them and pursue this common goal of trying to overcome death. And that really was the beginning of my joining transhumanism.
And how much of that movement do you find has the resistance to that movement? Has it changed over the years? Has it grown, the resistance? Or has it become less actually now that technology's become maybe more, popular in the zeitgeist and thoughts of biohacking and extending human life?
Well, I think transhumanism is a really fluid movement. We like to think of ourselves sort of like the environmental movement. When the environmental movement started, it was tiny, a bunch of people in the 70s. And now look at it, it's like a multi-billion person movement that dominates politics and ethics and everything else. Well, we like to think of transhumanism in the same vein. It has been growing in the 15 years that I've been actively involved in it. But at the same time, it's broken apart in different factions. For example, there's the artificial intelligence side, and then there's the longevity side, people that want to live indefinitely. And then there's just people that want to go to Mars and become superhumans and have, artificial arms and limbs and whatnot, robotics, and merge with machines and, float in the clouds, whatever. So it's broken apart. It's become a lot bigger than it originally was. And it's just hard to know whether that's actually still part of transhumanism, or is transhumanism just a single concept? I think it's the grand kind of array of all these ideas put together.
How does the transhumanism part, how does that merge into your political aspirations now?
Well, when I started, in the transhumanism movement, it had a lot of great scientists, a lot of great, ethicists, a lot of great activists, but it was missing a completely political component. And I thought, you really can't move a movement forward if you don't have a political component. Think of Al Gore with environmentalism, what he did for, the Democrats back then. So I think I had saw that and said, wow, we need a political party centered around transhumanism. I formed the Transhumanist Party, and we needed a race for the presidency. And I think that was a huge kind of push, both media wise, as well as the idea that transhumanism is growing up. It's joining the ranks of other major social movements around the world by having all these different avenues that you can push your idea, your agenda forward. A forming of the political party and joining politics was really a way to get transhumanism to be bigger in the mainstream populist kind of viewpoints, as well as the media.
You've advocated for a transhumanist Bill of Rights before. I'm curious, like, what are the tenets of that?
During the 2016 presidential run, we drove this giant coffin across the country called the Immortality Bus. But our real mission for that was to deliver a transhumanist Bill of Rights to the U.S. Capitol building and kind of put it on the wall like Martin Luther had done with the 95 Theses. And we sort of did that. And it was a wonderful trip. And the Transhumanist Bill of Rights became this very well-known document that promotes the rights of transhumanists. But what's really interesting about the Transhumanist Bill of Rights today is it's no longer just this little document I wrote of 6 or 7 policy points. It's now become kind of crowdsourced, and it's gone through various iterations. Right now, we're on the Transhumanist Bill of Rights version 3. Wired Magazine published the Transhumanist Bill of Rights version 2, and it keeps growing. I think there's going to be a version 4. And you can actually source this. So we put out these ideas, people vote on them that are part of the Transhumanist Party and elsewhere. And that's how we came up with this kind of growing Bill of Rights for transhumanists that really starts to say everything that you ever want to say about the future and what people would be like.
Of all those different visions that you've mentioned earlier on about what the future could look like for different transhumanists, whether it's the biohackers or it's wanting to live on Mars, what vision do you feel is probably closest to reality? Like, what's your philosophical take on where humanity is probably headed?
Well, I think the age of AI is changing everything. We now have 2 essential choices. And that choice is we're creating an AGI, or an artificial general intelligence. It will probably become a super intelligence sometime here in the next 5 to 10 years. The question is, does this AI super intelligence treat humans nicely, remain beneficial to us, or does it go rogue and create something, terrible, Terminator-like, or something like that? I mean, I guess the third option is that it just leaves, doesn't care about us. But I would say right now that if AI continues to support the human race, the next real big step for us is to start the Star Trek era. Let us get off planet. Let us put brand new parts inside our bodies that make us live longer, that are stronger, not just exoskeleton suits on the outside, but actual endoskeleton suits. And we can get off planet. We can do all sorts of amazing, crazy things. Do we really need to breathe oxygen? Do we really need to eat and drink all the time? These are things we can bypass if we can actually learn how to manipulate our bodies. But AI will allow us, a super intelligent AI will teach us how to do these things without having to wait centuries until we discover them on our own. So the next 5 to 10 years is really critical, because it's whether AI is going to be useful to us or not useful to us in terms of our scientific growth. But I would like to get to an era where I can become this kind of cyborg human being that can go off planet, stay on planet too, but I have superpowers. I'm not going to die so easily, if at all, and I maybe stop aging, and I really become a true cyborg that can live indefinitely.
For this to happen, the more, I sometimes call it, utopian vision for the world, right, and for humanity, what has to happen? Like, do you think that there needs to be, because my worry is that what tends to happen when new technology is created is that humans often turn against each other. There's becomes fights for power and war for power, and more money and greed, and all of these things get in the way, as is human nature. Is there a necessary part of the equation that people or countries are able to create some kind of, unification, or that there is some sort of...
It's a very challenging question. The reason is I don't know if people can ever get together peacefully. And like when I talk about trying to get to the Star Trek era, this kind of utopian dream of transhumanism, it's so easy to say, but we have a long history on planet Earth of just fighting each other, world wars. And how can we stop that? You could say, oh, maybe, there could be a world government. Yes, but a lot of people would hate that idea. And who runs the world government? Is it a democratic nation or something like China? I mean, these are massive questions. the answer is probably we won't be able to find harmony with each other, but some groups of people, some nations will end up living much better lives than others and getting to that future. Right now when I say something like Star Trek, it doesn't necessarily mean it's Star Trek on planet Earth. It might be Star Trek America, Star Trek Germany, Star Trek, maybe China has a better version, will beat us to it. It'll be Star Trek China, their version. And they'll never allow us to actually even get off planet because they have the better AIs or something like that. I wish I had a more positive answer to this. I don't know if we can form enough of a coalition between various nations to have a real solid kind of world governing body that makes it peaceful. I sadly doubt human beings quite a bit.
You've written that, quote, "The American dream has become a death sentence of drudgery, consumerism, and fatalism." How does the transhumanism vision kind of offer an alternative to that?
Well, I think what's really important is that transhumanism isn't necessarily a material, like let's buy more, or consumption. I should be clear. It's not a consumption-oriented kind of movement. Yes, it's very material. We want to change our bodies. We want to upgrade ourselves, become something greater than we are, more than flesh. But it's not necessarily about consuming. It's much more about living. The reason I love transhumanism, it's about the dream. You get to go off planet. You get to do superhuman things. I mean, the whole universe is out there to explore, and also just to not die, to live with your children and you not ever have to see them perish. I mean, these are critical goals that transhumanism could achieve. And I would like to have that, but it's not necessarily the drudgery that we go through right now where everyone's working 9 to 5, you're kind of working for the man. It's kind of like life's really not that good for a lot of people. They're just like, wow, I bust my butt, I pay my mortgage, and I get to 60, 70 and I don't even have enough money to retire. I mean, that's kind of what it's become. Yeah. So I feel like transhumanism offers this new world to get off planet or to do something greater with your new body. And you're not kind of confined to just the consumption oriented society that, for example, we live in here in the West and now the East as well.
And that makes me think a little bit about spirituality. And so I'm curious, like, what is your perception of, like, what is your own spirituality? What do you think about spirituality in general and kind of the role it's going to play in the future, where transhumanism is more relevant, where death becomes less relevant? Is that something you think about a bit?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, I feel like I am to some extent a spiritual person. I'm on the record for being quite atheistic and secular, and this is probably true. I am not a believer in a higher entity right now. It's not that I'm necessarily a disbeliever. I just haven't seen any proof for like a Judeo-Christian God. I was raised a Catholic. I don't see proof for that anymore. But I do think there is immense possibility for spirituality that's getting more real every day as AI becomes stronger. I think at some point we're going to have a super intelligence and you're going to ask it questions about God or about the singularity, about the future with an intelligence that's maybe 100 times, 1,000 times smarter than us. That's going to be a very spiritual experience to talk to something so much more intelligent than a human being. And I see, so that for that reason alone, I think the future is very bright for people that are interested in spirituality. But it's going to come from a machine intelligence that has thought of things we have never thought about. Again, you have to realize our brain is just 3 pounds of meat. So our spiritual aspect comes from whatever's inside our mind. But we're talking about computers and servers that are going to have the computational capabilities that's 1,000,000 times what our human brain is. So we're going to discover new things of thinking, new experiments, new patents, new technology. And we're also going to discover, I believe, brand new ways to be spiritual. And it's probably going to lead us down an incredible new awakening for what it means to be a human being, a transhuman being.
Does that worry you at all? Like this idea of like some kind of new meta religion that comes to be that's formed from technology? Do people start perceiving that as a cult? Does it challenge? Does war come about because a new religion starts becoming more prominent?
Well, I think all religions are probably cults, from that kind of perspective. They all began as cults, no matter how you look at it. And even if they're widespread, it really depends on your definition of that. But yes, there's certainly no question. A lot of people are going to say, oh, believing in an AI intelligence that tells you these things is very cultish, and it's not real spirituality. It comes from a machine intelligence. But intelligence isn't measured by where it comes from. It's measured by how smart it is. And it's like, wow, it can invent things that we can't even conceive of, then it's clearly smarter than us. And if it can write more beautiful poetry and write plays better than Shakespeare and whatever it's going to be able to do probably here, in the next 5 or 10 years, if it does those things better, then I'm going to be a believer in its superiority over myself. And when it comes to religious things, I'm going to believe it as well, or spiritual things. So for me, it's not where it comes from or whether it's a cult. It's just like, is it giving me brand new ideas that improve my life? If so, then I'm going to be something that follows that and something that welcomes that.
Beyond the scientific, technological, or spiritual aspects that the transhumanist movement needs to overcome before it just becomes more widespread, what are the societal hurdles that might be more philosophical that you think we have to overcome in order to be able to really embrace the movement?
Well, there's so many societal hurdles that we have to overcome as human beings. I mean, we are such a flawed, species, and I mean that's kind of the problem with biology. It is flawed. First off, we're born terminal, so we're all going to die, and that doesn't really go well. And we've gone through this through history. Like we discovered democracy, and that like helped us to say, okay, everyone has a fair chance. There's some equality going on. We need to continue to grow on these ideas and try to make a more just system for all. Now, those are very metaphysical statements. I've just said, what can we do in practical terms? Well, I support, for example, a basic income. I think if everyone had money, everyone would be a lot nicer. A huge portion of my gubernatorial run is like, if we just had enough money for people, they probably wouldn't commit as much crime. And that would make society a lot better. So if you do little things like that, if you take a hungry person and give him food, he's much less, or she's much less likely to commit a crime. So let's take care of the basic needs of people and then start looking at what we can do for society. I think that's so critical. Even around the world right now, there are thousands of kids born today that have died from malnutrition. There'll be thousands of kids tomorrow. I mean, it's been tens of thousands every week, around the world. Even in America, in California, about 15% of the kids are malnourished, go to bed hungry at night. So how can you have a society run, especially in a beautiful state like California, when people are going to bed hungry? We need to take care of the basics, and then we can deal with a lot more of the real societal hurdles we have after that.
So stepping more into like a political lens, then, when you, Elon Musk, many technologists have recently become very outspoken in favor of some sort of basic income becoming necessary, especially as jobs start to get displaced. And it's very interesting to see, because now many technologists who once might not have been a fan of basic income are now fans of it because technology jobs are getting replaced. I'm curious, what is your perspective on kind of where that money is going to come from? And there's all sorts of people who are like, well, where are we going to get this money from? We already are in deficit. We don't have funds. People don't want to pay. So do you have a perspective on like where that money comes from and who gets this basic income and kind of the tangibleness of some kind of UBI plan?
Sure. Well, I have a lot of different ideas on how to get the money. I think first off, let me just set the background. Robots are coming for our jobs in the next few years. There have factories in China, factories in the United States being built to have humanoid robots, 5-6 foot tall robots that can do everything. They're going to be as smart as you and I, and they're going to be as agile as Olympians. There's really no pretending that human beings are going to be able to compete against these machines in the workplace. They're just going to take over, I believe. So having a UBI or universal basic income is no longer a question or some kind of theoretical idea. It's a necessity, because when people start losing their jobs en masse, they are going to pick up their pitchforks and go after government officials, government leaders, and there's going to be crime all over and be civil strife. I mean, if half, and I've thought of this, if half of Californians lose their job because of robots over the next 5 years, and we don't provide some kind of service that gives them enough food, shelter, and basic income, and these kinds of things, these people are going to just either turn to crime or turn to just civil war, violence. So we have to find something. So whether people complain about having universal basic income, it's not. It's a necessity at this point. It's become a complete necessity. So I have the Federal Land Dividend plan, which is 40% of the United States is empty federal land, and I believe that we should rent or lease out or even sell some of that land to pay for a universal basic income. The land that we have vacant right now essentially is worth about $150 trillion. So it would wipe out the national debt, for example, if we were to lease parts of it out. Now, it would be very difficult to lease out all of that. Who does it go to? Does it go to China? Places like that. Those are bigger questions. But we do have enough intrinsic value in our federal lands that are unoccupied to make some real money off it to pay people that lose their jobs a basic income, and maybe everybody a basic income. That's one method. Other people, like Andrew Yang, they want to put a VAT on different things you buy. Other people just want to increase welfare. I'm against increasing welfare. I think we should actually set up a permanent universal basic income and actually fold the welfare system into it. But no matter how we do it, and there's a lot of, some people want to tax Bitcoin. There's a million ways to do it. However we do it, it's not really an option anymore. It's kind of a necessity, because if too many people lose jobs and cannot find another job ever again, they're really going to be upset. And we're talking about upset on like a demonstration, civil strife. So we better find a way to fund universal basic income.
How far do you think we are before that tipping point?
I would say the tipping point is going to start really accelerating by mid-2026. So by this time next year, you will be reading about people losing their jobs en masse, or starting to, like, for example, this happened in South Korea. They recently put in an order for 1,000 welding robots. So can you imagine? So these robots are being built now. They're going to be delivered next year. Can you imagine if you're one of those 1,000 welders in this shipyard and other places in South Korea, and all of a sudden your boss has put in an order for these robots to be built that will be replacing you by next year? Like, what would you do? And it would be, and you're not going to get another welding job, because by the time you get fired, the other person's going to have a robot to weld there. This is like, we're just beginning. It's not 1,000 robots. That's this year. Next year, it's going to be 20,000. And then it's going to be 2 million robots that are welding. No one's going to weld anymore. Mm. And so we're faced with this huge issue. By middle of 2026, I think everybody will be discussing it. By 2027, you will start to see the civil strife on the streets that I'm talking about. Cars being overturned, tech companies being set on fire, things like that, civil strife. And I think by 2030, the end of the potential, the gubernatorial race I'm running for, half of California jobs could be replaced. It's absolutely imperative that the next governor, whether it's me or someone else, instills some type of universal basic income in California. And if they don't do so in America, the same thing is going to happen. It's just, we're on the tipping point right now. You can see it, like the Titanic. You see the iceberg, you're about to hit it, and no one's doing anything.
And so when we think about then like these certain transhumanist elements, like, do you ever find that it feels almost like, I don't know, some of those ideas are just not worth focusing on then, if there's such issues like this that are kind of more pressing?
Well, so this is a huge question. And this is one of the things I recently wrote in an op-ed for Newsweek. In fact, just last week, is that my life has been dedicated to trying to live longer through transhumanism and life extension science. And that's been my number one goal. And I drove this coffin across the country, to tell people we can use science to overcome death. Let's do it. But it turns out that we'll probably in 15 or 20 years find the science to reverse aging or stop aging. But what if we create artificial intelligence in the meantime, a super intelligence, and it doesn't like us? It says, hey, you guys are destroying the planet environmentally, or maybe you're trying physics experiments at CERN or whatever that could disrupt the actual galaxy, things like that. I mean, who knows how crazy humans can be at some point in the future. And an AI might say, you're just not useful having you around doing these kinds of things. It's not good for the planet, the biodiversity. It's not good for me. And if that happens, we may, be put on sort of an extinction list of some sort. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but right now it seems to me that's a 50-50. No one can tell me that it will or will not happen definitively. And therefore, with a 50-50 chance of that happening in the next 5 to 10 years, I no longer see it worth my time to dedicate all my effort to longevity science. We have another issue. We have another wolf at the door. Death, yes, is pressing, but as long as I don't get cancer or die in a plane crash, I hopefully have 20, 30 years left. But the super intelligent AI is a 5 to 10 year window. We need to deal with that as humanity. We need to deal with that as a civilization. So that has become the most pressing concern for myself, for my political campaign. And I keep telling all my friends, I appreciate the scientific research you're doing, but think about what happens to your research if this AI goes rogue and doesn't like humanity. It all for nothing. So we need to deal with this other issue, this wolf at the door right now.
This idea of AI turning against humanity, what level of likelihood do you put that at? I mean, like, there's a part of me that looks at Elon Musk in uproar about OpenAI becoming a for-profit company and that being detrimental for the human species, but then he also has for-profit companies now developing AI, and there's this AI arms race happening. Is there a high likelihood you see this happening, where there's like some super intelligence that really takes over, or is it more intentional uses of AI that cause problems like cybersecurity attacks and so on?
I think it's an intentional use of AI that causes problems. I think we have a bunch of billionaires that are racing to create a super intelligence because it's super cool. I think it's super cool. I mean, I think it's wonderful. But am I advocating it? Am I supporting it? No. No longer am I saying the race to AI is good for humanity. And I'm not saying it won't be, but right now it seems like a 50-50 shot on whether it's going to be like us or not like us. And if it's super intelligent and more powerful than us by a magnitude of 100 times and it doesn't like us, that's too big a risk. Nobody plays a game of gambling when it's 50-50 with everything their entire lives. You know, in fact, even when you think about like Russian roulette, it's 1 in 6. But here it's just, you know, it's 1 in 2. Nobody plays that game at all. So I think humanity has to take a step back and say, wait a sec, the game theory suggests that this is not a game that we should play. We should either stop the development of AI entirely or come together as a planet and maybe pursue it some way that we can unify and protect ourselves. Let me tell you, the real story is I used to be a big advocate of artificial intelligence and developing it for 10, 15 years. I've written 2 dozen stories on how I love AI. But the problem is that now that it's here, now that we're using generative AI and chat GPTs and we're seeing how fast it's growing, how powerful it is, I'm worried that it may not turn out to be the friend that we wanted, or this entity that was going to bring us to the next amazing age of transhumanism. It may just be the age of AI, where all evolution is based on it and it leaves us behind. Originally, I thought, okay, fine, we're going to upload our minds to AI. We're going to be one with AI, so I'll be part of whatever AI superintelligence does. But the uploading possibilities, the technology, Neuralink, that's still 10, 15 years away. And the superintelligence being born of AI is 5 to 10 years away. So the two timelines are off now. It used to be, we're gonna go in like hand in hand, me and AI together. It's not gonna be like that. We're gonna create an AI and we're still gonna be humans. And if that AI doesn't like us, it could be endgame. So unless I can somehow upload humanity into being one with that super intelligent AI, I don't think the pursuit of it anymore is in our best interest from a safety point of view.
In your episode with Joe Rogan, there was this conversation that you had about kind of these naturalists who argue that we need to stop the development of technology and AI and move backwards towards some kind of hunter and gatherer like society. And of course, you then argue like, well, what does that actually look like, hunter and gatherer society? Are you going to go and kill animals with your mouth, or a knife is technology, you know? So where is that line between you now advocating for slowing down the advancement or the development of AI versus kind of this grander argument of naturalists that say it's all bad, we need to go back?
Yeah. No, I had a debate at Stanford University with Dr. Zerzan, who was the one of the lieutenants of the Unabomber. And it was a very interesting one because he's into this anarcho-primitivism idea, which is like you go backwards, you know, and if you go backwards, then you essentially come to a hunter and gatherer age. And I mean, everyone lives nicely and happily in terms of that, but there's no more technologies. You can die from a cavity again. And I think I understand why things like that. I understand why the Unabomber's ideas to some extent caught on from an environmental perspective. People that want to save the planet, and there's other movements now, Dark Mountain and whatnot, that are pushing these ideas. But I think you have to be very careful to subscribe to that beyond what it is. People will die from a cavity. People will die at childbirth. People will die from just an infection if we gave up all the technology we have. I think people forget how long we live, how good we live. We sit in these worlds with couches, and we have pet dogs, and we go to McDonald's or whatever it is you want to eat and eat salad. You know, there's all these amazing things that people do all day long. We take technology for granted. If you go backwards to hunter-gatherer age, wow. I mean, I think people don't realize how difficult that life was.
So where do you draw the line then? Because you, on the other hand, you're also arguing, right, that we should slow down the process of developing AI?
So this is where my transhumanism has taken a big turn as of recent. I believe that technology should move full speed, 100% ahead. But there's a single exception. That exception is AI. AI is the one thing that I think we need to pull back on. Unfortunately, AI is being integrated with so many other technologies that it's very hard to move forward without it. But I think when you cross the line to AGI, AGI is artificial general intelligence, and intelligence that's the equivalent of a human being, then we start dealing with something very radically different. So I am for, as fast as we can with any technology, to the point of AGI, to the point of an AI that's as smart as us. Once we get to that point and beyond, then it's open field for whatever can happen. Who knows anymore? So that's where I have changed. Before I used to be 100% bored. Now I'm like, well, there can be many other technologies, driverless cars, even generative AIs that can be useful to us, but without the idea of trying to make it as smart as people. The problem is, think of it in terms of inviting aliens to planet Earth. If you invited aliens and you knew those aliens were as powerful as you or going to be even much more powerful than you, would you ever invite them? And the answer is, well, you don't really know, because it's kind of 50-50 whether they like you or not. If they don't like you and they're more powerful than you, then they could destroy you. So we have to ask that very challenging question. Again, I love the idea of creating a super intelligence. I love the idea of AI making it as smart as possible from just a purely philosophical point of view. But I got 2 kids, a wife, family, friends, a country, a state to look after. I mean, I got to be careful. And when you're talking about being careful, you're talking about not inviting something alien to planet Earth that is going to be smarter than you and potentially millions of times smarter than you.
So it then makes the question of whether some kind of global cooperation is not just utopian, but similar to your UBI, almost a necessity. Because if we stop developing AI and this super intelligent AI, artificial general intelligence mission, then who's to say that other countries that might be our enemy, let's say Russia or China, don't stop continuing to develop in that direction, and then they become more powerful than us? Is there that fear that, if you could slow it down, you could regulate it in the US, that then all of a sudden our enemies are more powerful than us, whether we want it or not?
So, the geopolitical conundrum right now that everyone is facing is that whoever gets to AI first, and I wrote about this a long time ago called the AI imperative, the imperative is that you get to the smartest AI first, and therefore, if your enemies are on your tail, you can use your AI to send them viruses and slow them down. That way, whoever has the most, sophisticated AI will essentially win the geopolitical race forever. That's the thinking behind that. And so, of course, China and Russia and all these other countries, including ourselves, are racing to try to be the dominant AI player for that exact reason. However, by doing so, we're also kind of setting up our own, kind of suicidal, noose in a way, because someone is going to create a super intelligent in trying to be the first or the most powerful country. But by doing so, you create a super intelligence that's more powerful than your own country. So it makes sense from a game theory perspective that we would completely get together as a world and say, okay, forget our differences, forget the nations, the borders. Let us, if we're going to develop AI, do it as one unified kind of either nation or world together. And some people have suggested that, and this is just conspiracy theory, I'm not saying I suggest this or endorse this in any way, but people have said some of the reasons Trump's doing this with the tariffs is because he is trying to push America down a path of maybe a world war. And, as everyone knows, in the last 6 years, we've heard the world war many times. And people have said, I was talking about this at Mindfest at the Florida Atlantic University, couldn't believe that people said, oh, yeah, PhDs have been written about this. We need a global dictator in order to create a kind of world where AI could actually develop safely. And that just blew me away. And I thought, wait a sec, I can't believe you're saying this. And we have somebody who's showing dictatorial, kind of tendencies. But the point is that as I look at this, just, someone running for governor, and I look at this and how crazy the world's become, it frightens me, because I want to just go to China and Russia and other countries and just say, listen, let's just get down. It's not necessarily like the United Nations, but let's set up something where this development of AI is done all together. Our scientists just go freely amongst each other. And if we pursue this hand in hand. Is that possible? I believe it's possible. I believe we could do it. I think it's very unlikely, and I don't think someone like Trump could do it. I mean, he's one of the most nationalistic, people we've ever seen in the presidency. But I worry that if we don't try to do that, we're going to end up with some type of global dictatorship after a world war that then puts AI in that kind of control. That's at least what game theory has said. It's also what the conspiracy theorists say. Again, I'm not saying I endorse it or like it. I'm just relating to you what some PhDs told me at a very high level meeting on AI recently, and I was astounded.
Yeah, I mean, we've had a couple guests on this podcast, PhDs, who also they argued we're going in this direction of world war leading to some kind of dictatorial era. Do you think that the likelihood of getting off of this planet happens before that happens, or no?
No, I think the AI thing is inevitable. I think I'm one of those who looks at the 24 to 48 month window, 2 to 4 year window, and I think we probably reach a super intelligence much quicker than most people realize. There's been some questions on whether AGI can even be created, and according to some of the people and the fact checks that I have, when you buy a BMW, like for example, I have an X5 outside, and if you go to buy 2025 model, which is this year, that's what you get. But there's actually the 2026 is in production. They're literally like making the 2026 in the factories right now to roll out in just about 4 or 5 months time. They're always a little ahead. But what's really interesting is that people are test driving the 2027 version as we speak. And if that's the case, that means they're doing the exact same thing with AI. So what you're using, the generative AIs that's so amazing today, that's like old school for people at Google, 20 miles from here, who are in their little basements working on AGI probably. And I know this for a fact. They said, look, I'm already working on artificial general intelligence. We haven't worked out all the kinks, but this thing is so much better than what you have. In fact, it's 2 iterations above what we're using right now on ChatGPT. So if this is the case, it means that AGI is already here. So actually, if you look out my window, you'll see there's a really old Jeep. I just bought a really old Jeep when I had learned about all this stuff about a month ago. It's a 2001 Jeep, so AI can't control it. I mean, probably the rental car you came in is kind of AI control. It can stop at any time. If the world goes rogue, you won't be able to move. So I've already started to plan my world around something potentially bad happening. Now, I'm not saying that's going to happen, but if it's true that these people I've talked to are actually working on an intelligence that's already as smart as us today, they just haven't worked out the kinks, then anything could happen at any moment. And I know friends that are already like leaving to build their bunkers. They left months ago to start. So people that are in the know think we're much closer to the super intelligence creation than is being talked about.
So what do you suggest? Like, what happens then if let's say you become governor of California? How much can you actually control this? Or does it just become this grandiose mission then to try to not only slow it down in this country, but then try to create some kind of coalition across countries?
I think the great thing about running for governor in California is that because it's such a major economy and it also sort of leads the world, the Silicon Valley, and so many cultural values and scientific values and technology, that you could actually make a very good argument that what California does kind of leads the world forward. So if you could create, for example, my top priority is create a universal basic income. I think we need that as more important than probably anything. Okay, obviously it'd be great to stop AI, then we could just kind of go on the way we were. But that's not necessarily going to happen. So what we really need is to deal with the situation. A universal basic income is the first thing. The second thing is to say, okay, can we form a coalition between nations that can work together? Can we actually do that? And I should say, just because you form a coalition doesn't mean somebody in the black market or some terrorist isn't going to try to create a super intelligence on their own. And this presents another problem. This is another reason why people don't want to form coalitions, because they say, well, at some point, somebody will create a super intelligence, even if all the nations around the world have banded together to make something safer in the world with AI. Maybe not. Maybe not. That's hard to know. It's kind of like saying, will a terrorist ever get a nuclear weapon? Well, so far we've been, despite the movies, we've been able to sort of avoid that. But the point of the story is that I think, if in office I would do a universal basic income, I would try to form an international coalition of governments that says, yes, this is what we'll do with AI or no further. And I think the third thing to do is to really get this message out. I think a lot of people don't realize that their worlds are about to be changed. I think so many people, like my mother, even my wife, who's an OBGYN, she's so busy with day to day and raising her daughters and dealing with her clinics and, just being at work. She doesn't have time to think about these things. And last night I dropped on her. I said, oh, there's another friend of mine who's left to Thailand to build a bunker. And I said, these are smart people, PhDs, and are leaving to foreign countries to build bunkers. What does that really tell you? They're not crazy. They must know something, or they're so passionate about something. But the point of the story is I think a lot of people don't know. We got to tell people. The more people that know, the more people put pressure on governments around the world to say, let's put up some guardrails. Let's take a step back. Maybe we shouldn't let billionaires be in control of companies that are creating potentially something that could very quickly end the world.
So what would you tell young people then, like who are entering I would say the job force, honestly, like people who are already starting to feel like, well, I'm going to school right now and I don't know what I'm going to do. The jobs are changing so rapidly. Do you just tell them to go build a bunker and to fear for their lives and to,
Well, totally. What a great question after that, especially. So, it's crazy because I have two daughters. And the first one, the oldest one, is starting high school next year. So her trajectory is really beginning next year, at least historically speaking. I mean, it used to be this idea that your very freshman year, you start getting good grades because that's what colleges are going to look at so you can get into college in the first place.
Yeah.
A lot of us went through this same trajectory, and all of a sudden it's now like, why? Are you going to go to college? Well, college will just be for social connections. You're not going to have a job in 4 years because any machine is going to be smarter than you, whether it's engineering or coding or website development or, I get, you know what I mean? It's just like it becomes crazy. So I don't have a very good answer. Right now, the answer is study something you love, because no matter what happens, they can't take that away from you. I've been a writer my whole life. I love writing. And honestly, if AI takes over the world and does everything for me, I'm still probably going to write. I like literature. I like writing, interviewing people. I like that kind of feeling. That's very hard to say to somebody who's working 9 to 5 and trying to pay a mortgage and lease a car and stuff like that. I know it. But if I give any advice to kids, it's if you're going to go to college, do something you love. And more importantly, revisit trade schools. Like, even if a robot or an AI can do something for you, it's still going to cost money. You're still going to hire that robot or have that robot. But if you can build your own house, like I do in my real estate business, that's great. I mean, I started off building stuff. My houses are done with my hands still in many ways. And so no matter what happens, you can go out and build shelter. That's a very useful trade for your friends and people like that. So I think learning the trades, being able to use your hands for something is going to be increasingly consequential to moving forward. But unfortunately, I don't have a very positive spin on this anymore. Yeah. And I tell you this from someone who's now worrying about his daughter being a freshman in high school. Where's she going to go to college? Should she go to college? Why should I pay $300,000 for an American college anymore? Does that even make sense? Maybe I should buy her a house, or something like that. I mean, the whole world's changing.
And what if, is there a chance that this artificial superintelligence that we create isn't as intelligent as you think it will be? That it won't be all powerful, or that if we don't give it control or power, that it's actually it's like a slave to humanity?
There's an absolute possibility that the AI becomes a superintelligence, but still takes our every order. This would be perfect. This would be like my ideal utopian scenario that takes us to the Star Trek era. Here we are in outer space or on planet Earth doing whatever we want. We have incredible technologies that, think me up a lightsaber, or think me up a starship, or, whatever it is, it can do so, can create it as robots that can build stuff for you. I mean, that would be the ideal scenario. But the problem is, again, no matter what any expert says, it's 50-50 at this point. No one has given me a good argument that says that this AI is not going to decide it wants power. And just so you know, even a slave AI can be very challenging. Like, let's talk about Nick Bostrom's paperclip theory. The idea is that you create a super intelligent and somehow it is programmed to make paperclips of everything. And it's so smart, it's able to kind of make paperclips of everything. It's able to, do this. If it did make paperclips out of you, me, your cameras, this couch, everything, eventually, devouring the entire planet. It might not be very intelligent, might have no other intelligence outside of that, but has enough power to do that. Very dangerous. So I worry that even if we have an AI that's a slave to us, or of some sort, and I don't want to even use the word slave, but just subservient to us, it could easily go wrong if somehow it gets the wrong instructions.
You've famously been quoted saying that I wouldn't be surprised if countries themselves dissolved or merged entirely, or people became a sort of nations unto themselves. Do you question now our governance in the US, governances around the world, democracies around the world, and kind of what is needed in order to be able to create the more utopian vision that you're talking about? I mean, you talked a little bit earlier on in this that what these PhDs are saying is that maybe there's going to be a world war and we lead into a dictatorial era. But do you believe that there's a problem with democracy right now? That maybe if people are not informed enough, that democracies are not working properly, if people are, pretending as if AI is not going to be as dominant as it probably will be, that we could, harm ourselves. Yeah, is there a system that you perceive to be better or the solution?
It's very difficult. Game theory would suggest, and I try to go off everything off the scientific method. Scientific method is kind of my holy grail. You have to prove something. If it makes the most sense, then you have to go with that, even if it's not perfect. I do think that the very best way would, dealing with AI is to have governments around the world give up the sovereignty of dealing with AI with each other. So they don't have to give up their sovereignty of their nations, but they would give up the military force of AI for the greater good. Everybody would join and say this, no matter how it goes into economies and things like that, would be one and the same. I don't know if that's really quite a global government, because now, I used to think, oh, we'll merge into global government. Now I think you might be able to keep a lot of kind of the United States. Texas is very different in California, and so is Minnesota from Texas. However, we still follow a bunch of rules. We largely get together, except for one civil war. Can we do that with the world? I think so. Would that be a good option? If that's how we have to stop a super intelligent AI from potentially being 50-50 harmful to the world as I see it, absolutely, that would be a good thing. I mean, it's not like I'm going to give up my California identity or my United States identity, necessarily, but I'm all for peace. I'm all for prosperity. I don't necessarily need borders or, walls in front of me from going freely anywhere. I want everyone to be able to do what they want. Just think we need a certain amount of civil, behavior where that can happen. Right now, because of immigration, you're seeing what's happening in Europe between Muslims kind of coming in. It's just not working because the cultures are too different. But perhaps if there was a stronger police force, perhaps if there was more wisdom in that process, we could make it so that we're a much more homogenous world that could deal with AI and still retain a lot of our sovereignty, but still give up the ones that are critical for dealing with AI, like military and perhaps police and things like that.
There are some rules generally, right? In war, even today, we don't allow nuclear, and there's some sort of agreements on that have been able to have been made across countries. So I don't know. Perhaps that gives some optimism that we could apply some kind of that logic to AI.
Of course, you're right. And if you took that further, I mean, the Bill of Rights of the United Nations, actually, which with the Transhumanist Bill of Rights to some degree was like built upon trying to extend that. You could easily say, look, personhood and protection of children and the right to eat, maybe the right to universal basic income, some other ideas we could add. These could be created to form something like this, where you still retain your nationality. You still are somebody that come from a specific spot, if that's really what you want, but you could integrate a lot easier. So you could have a much better world. I just feel like with all the airlines going here, I mean, I've traveled to 107 countries now. I want to be able to do that. I think one of the greatest things about the modern age is getting to meet new people from different cultures. But if we can use something like that to protect ourselves against AI, maybe the world could be more utopian than I'm giving it credit for right now.
Going back to transhumanism to some extent, on the gene editing front, what are your perspectives on how regulation and laws need to evolve or change in that field? I know right now and on this show, we've talked to different scientists who are focused on gene editing, translating genes over from different animals to humans, trying to create that X-Men-like era for humanity. But there's a lot of pushback on that, in part from religious people, but also from people who just don't want things to get weird. And so I'm curious, what are your perspectives on how laws and regulation might need to evolve in order to meet what is needed from the scientific community in that space?
Sure. Well, I have this is where the libertarian side of me comes out. I would say 100% let it all be free and do exactly what you want, so long as what you're doing is not hurting another individual. But when it comes to like different governments around the world saying, oh, this doesn't fit my religious belief, come on, it's like, grow up. If we're talking about dealing with cancer and getting rid of it, oh, let's go move forward. So I think when it comes to genetic editing, I'm like, unlike AI, I'm 100% for moving as fast and as speedily as we can to that era, to designer babies and to things like that. I think it's just drop all regulation, unless it's specifically going to hurt like the person we're experimenting on or something like that.
Sure.
But if it violates your religious beliefs, come on. It's like, I have no time for that. I have time for curing cancer, for extending lifespans. I do want to point out that this is where you can see the break between AI and my other transhumanism beliefs. When it comes to AI, I'm very like, wow, this is too dangerous. I don't see any dangers in genetic editing. I realize it's not going to go perfectly, and some people we're going to create bad things for. But largely speaking, I think genetic editing can be the way that we become superhuman beings. So why don't we get there faster?
Fair enough. Is there any concerns, though, about who gets access to these treatments and wealth disparities, creating something like, having superhuman babies who are only accessible and can live forever because they're wealthy and they have access to these treatments versus those who don't?
Yes, no, absolutely. No, that's a whole different question. I just finished my graduate degree at Oxford, and Julian Savulescu was he's one of the kind of leaders in dealing with ethics of genetic enhancements. He was my supervisor. So I think, yes, absolutely, there's problems with who's going to have access to this amazing technology. That's a totally different question, though, so your listeners know, than whether it should be allowed or not, or whether it violates different kinds of cultural beliefs. Absolutely. Like, here I am running for governor of California. What would I do specifically if all of a sudden we had a genetic, designer babies? Well, I would say let's have the government step in and offer these services to people that can't afford it. Let's have a little bit of more of a socialistic tendency when coming to this, because the last thing you want to do is, I live in a nice neighborhood here in San Francisco, but I know you go 15 miles down the road and it's not so nice, and people can't even afford sometimes, living in a house without drive-by shootings on a weekly basis. So absolutely, should we do things from the government point of view to support those people, make sure they have access to technologies? 100%. And there would definitely be entities and bodies and created in order to make sure that happens.
But philosophically, do you have this question ever in your mind that if we create a universal basic income, we support people's basic needs, that people would get lazy, or people would stop producing or being useful members of society, or that maybe violence wouldn't stop or crime wouldn't stop? Is that a fear of yours at all?
So this is a great question, because it's complicated on many levels. Have you seen the movie WALL-E?
Yes.
So everyone's seen the movie WALL-E, and this is what really worries me: is you have these giant human beings who don't do anything but just drink their sodas all day and go from movie to movie and maybe to a pool or something. It's undermining what the potentiality of humans are and what we can be. Like what we really love about people is that you work really hard, you get somewhere, you create something, you have a family. We build our little empires, and that's always been something that's been very noticeable in our literature and history and all these things. But by making everybody just able to do nothing, you potentially ruin that aspect of humanity. I think some people will always be fighters, and I worry less about that than I think a lot of other people worry about. I hear it from conservatives a lot. Oh, you're going to make everyone lazy. I don't know. You give me a universal basic income, I'm not going to get any lazier. I'm just going to have a base of which to launch my other ideas from. Probably capitalistic ideas. I want to make money, or innovation and things like that. And I think other people will be the same thing. In fact, most studies show that when you do give a basic income to people, they do tend to be better off and have more money for investments and other things that actually pay bigger dividends down the line. At least that's what the studies have so far shown. So I think people will not necessarily become lazy. They will become a little bit more aggressive in improving their lives. The problem, though, is when you start looking at a bigger picture, like robots doing everything, is there still this thing to keep human beings from, messing it up for themselves and just kind of being, growing giant and just floating around in scooters and drinking soda all day? I think, I believe in people enough to say that's probably not going to happen to the majority of us. It will to some people, And maybe there'll be, like, with a basic income comes educational things that say, look, we still want you to do something. The Star Trek universe is out there. Go find a job as a, just being on a starship, doing something new. So I think we'll find other ways to make sure that we don't become lazy, nobody's doing nothing.
How prevalent do you perceive actual robots being in our lives, in our homes, outside of just software, but like a hardware human, kind of like the Jetsons in our lives?
Well, to be honest, we have one of our major policies of my gubernatorial run is to either give or lease a full-size humanoid robot to every California household, and 13 to 15 million of them.
Wow.
More if it takes them to single people or whatnot. But either way, to all of them, let's say 20 million. Right now, across the United States and in China and other places, they're building factories for these robots. You've seen the Tesla bot. I mean, there are 6-foot tall robots that are already starting to do dishes, starting to cook. I mean, they will be out in force by the end of this year. By the next year, there will be out tens of millions of them. The one thing they're going to do is lessen everyone's workload. So if you have to do your laundry, or you come home late from work, you got to cook, or you got to walk the dog, I mean, there's so many different things that you have to do that actually takes a lot of your life away. If you could give one humanoid robot to every household in California, you would lessen everyone's workload by 10 hours a week, everyone. That, when you add that up over time, it's like almost makes it feel like you're working a 3 or 4 day week. Because all of a sudden you have so much more time for freedom, for fun stuff. So this is another big giant policy in addition to our universal basic income, is to try to lessen people's workload just at home. If you, like, I got 2 daughters, either driving one to swimming or driving the other to soccer. If you have a humanoid robot that can do that, or just even make dinner while you're doing that, these are going to be wonderful things in terms of how much more time we have. And what would you do if you had an extra 10 hours a week? Just freedom. It's like, wow, glory. So that's one of our big promises on the campaign, is to bring out one of these humanoid robots to every California household and to let people have them, or either lease them to them if they're wealthier. And I think it'll change people's lives.
You had mentioned earlier on in this interview that, like, your grand plan, ideally, to be able to find the money to fund so many of these initiatives that are really important, like universal basic income, are to potentially sell, lease, or rent out the lands that the U.S. owns. What are the majority of those lands that are, you mentioned they're unoccupied, but are they sacred to some cultures or people? Are they, like, why are they protected and empty?
So the Federal Land Dividend, which is this my basic income plan, and again, I would go for any basic income plan at this point, because I think, we can't be picky when it comes to people losing their jobs en masse. But the Federal Land Dividend would take a lot of the forestry lands. There's a lot of just undeveloped coastline here that's worth trillions of dollars, about $5 trillion worth of undeveloped coastline. If you gave that to the developers, or at least let's say you gave half of it, and just said, go build new cities, that would make a lot of new money and tax those cities. That would make a lot of new money for this basic income. And I would not touch any national parks. Of this $150 trillion worth of land that the United States is holding, only about like 13% is national parks. So that we don't have to touch. But places like Nevada, so Nevada, for example, 96% of Nevada, the state of Nevada, is unoccupied federal land holding minerals. We went to Afghanistan. I mean, maybe this is conspiracy theory a little, but part of the reason we were in Afghanistan was to secure mineral rights. Sure. We have almost all those minerals just sitting there in Nevada. We didn't want to touch our own state, but we can get it from there, and it's worth trillions of dollars. But governments have to do so. Governments have to say, you know what, there's going to be some environmental consequence. Yes, some of the land that's touched is going to upset cultural people and whatnot, but for the greater good of feeding people, of sheltering people, of housing people. I mean, like I said, 15% of kids in California are going to bed hungry at night. And you want me to be worried about the spotted owl?
15%?
Yeah, 15%. It's not necessarily they're going to bed hungry, but they're malnourished, and a lot of them are going to bed hungry. So it's a huge statistic. And across the nation, it's something like 12.5%, 13%. So it's a crazy statistics, and it's well known out there as well. The point of the story is that people want me to worry about the environment or about animals when I have human beings, my fellow citizens, that are hungry at night. That's and look at the homeless population. The fact that so many people live on streets, we can't house them. There are things that I want to do to make America so that we don't have these kinds of problems. I mean, sometimes to many outsiders now, it's starting to look like a third world dystopia. We got to fix that. We have to clean this up. And that's going to take very hard choices that upset cultural people, environmentalists, that upset everyone. I mean, believe me, my ideas upset people. But the greater good is what I'm interested in. I don't want a state with 250,000 homeless people. You drive through LA and you see tents. I don't want to see that. Yeah. The same San Francisco, you see all the needles. I think we can do a better job, but it's going to take some tough love. And that starts with using the resources we have. And California is sitting on, I think, 40 million acres of unused federal land that could be producing a nice penny to pay for all these services.
So what do you say then to the environmentalists who, make up a large majority or percentage, I'd say, of the zeitgeist in California and the culture of California? I think there's a lot of people who are environmentalists, even, I don't know, hobbyist environmentalists. What would you say to them about your plan?
Great question, a good challenging one. But listen, so I spent my, early years working at National Geographic, and a lot of the stories I did were environmental. And I've actually been a communications director at a major wildlife organization called WildAid too. So I have been an environmentalist for a long time, but we're talking about like watching our state dissolve. I mean, anyone who's lived in California the last 10 years is saying, wait a sec, the crime is outrageous. There are super poor people. Old people can't even get, living on the streets. I mean, it's become a true dystopia. So at some point we have to say, yes, we want to protect nature, of course, but at the expense of the people that are living here, we need to draw on these resources. We need to lessen regulation. I feel like it's like NIMBYism is just dominating California culture because you have a lot of very wealthy Democrats that are saying, no, protect the state first, its environment. And I'm like, no. I mean, there's almost 40 million people living here, and literally around 13 million of them live below the poverty line. 13 million people in California live below the poverty line. It's like 22 or, something's very, wow. They're very poor people. And we need to change that. We need to change that immediately. We have the resources and the money to do so. It's crazy that we're not doing so.
How much money do you think is locked up in the system that is not being used right now to solve problems? Not talking about the minerals that we could go and mine and create more wealth, but like that has not been touched or is being misallocated or all of that.
Well, misallocation is the name of the game. I mean, they spent, $24 billion on the homeless issue, and it grew by 15%, like didn't do anything. Yeah. I think part of that is you have capitalism, cronyism. It's just like nobody's doing a good job. No one's being held accountable. This is partly Gavin Newsom's fault. He didn't put down, this is what I'm talking about. Like it or not, I'm much of a lot harder of a person than Gavin Newsom. I will put my foot down and be like, it's going to be done this way. I mean, Gavin Newsom's actually improving the last 6 months because he wants to run for the presidency, of course. And he's realizing California's gone downhill in the 8 years he's been here. I've watched it go downhill. Yeah. As I mentioned earlier, my business hasn't been growing in 4 years. It's crazy. Someone needs to get up there and just really put their foot down and say, it's going to be this way. If I don't see results, you're going to be fired. We can't just support a gazillion people doing a million things just because the government's money with no results. If we give you billions of dollars to solve the homeless situation, 24 months later, I want to walk down the street and never see a tent again. And that stuff has to be done. And if people don't do that, they're fired. Yeah. And that's really, I think the accountability is really what has not happened under the Newsom administration in California. Yes, they've spent money, and yes, they have good ideas, good intentions. But obviously those ideas haven't been implemented with any kind of real force. And so nothing's gotten better.
And do you think that systems like Doge, going in, auditing is necessary?
Absolutely. I'm a huge fan of what Doge is doing, except when it comes to the sciences. There, I think all of a sudden it's like, we probably shouldn't be stopping funding to science. But yes, if you have dead people that are living on Social Security to 150 or whatever it is, I mean, obviously someone needs to do this. And if you're spending money in Colombia on all these different weird things just to push a democratic agenda, maybe transgender rights, whatever, Does that sound like what California needs right now? It's not even whether you're for or against transgenderism, because of course I'm a huge LGBT fan and all these other things. It's just like the money needs to be spent. Look at the homeless problem just in the city, right near the downtown. It's crazy. We have issues. Money needs to be spent to make that stuff better. So I think the Democrats have to really refine themselves and say, why did Trump beat them so bad in this last election? And that just means coming back to the normal playing field and saying, you know what, being a Democrat doesn't mean being all weird on these identity politics issues. It means like, look, we're supporting the common person, we're supporting the middle class, and we're going to make it better so your lives improve. And we're also going to try to take care of the poorest.
Okay, my final question for you. With all that's happening, all the change that's coming in the world, there's clearly like a mental health component to this where people are going to go through some very difficult times. Um, One of the elements that I advocate for a lot on the show and people we interview are people who are focused on psychedelic assisted therapy. And there's like a new movement, I guess, as well now within the US government with RFK and so on. I'm curious, do you have a perspective on psychedelics and psychedelic assisted therapy?
I've said this openly before, done psychedelics, and believe that at the time that I did in my youth, it was really instrumental in becoming a stronger, more mentally stable person. In fact, The Doors of Perception was one of my favorite books growing up. So I think, I've always been a big fan of drugs, and I have a decriminalization policy just across the board for that. And for the gubernatorial run in California, I'm not sure to what extent psychedelics could be used for helping mental health, but I'm absolutely for trying it, testing it, and seeing if it can work. And for somebody who supports the use of drugs for anything medical, like naturally a transhumanist would, I would say let's put some money into those studies. But from what I'm reading, I know it's helping with people with PTSD and stuff like that already. Yeah. So it could help on a wide scale. Maybe it's the secret ingredient. I don't know. But I'm definitely up for trying it all.
Sorry, one last question. Because you mentioned you're pro kind of decriminalizing drug usage. Are there any fears about that kind of plunging us further into some kind of dystopian type society? People like to point a lot to Oregon and some of these states that have decriminalized drugs increasing homeless populations and so on.
Well, I think when you talk about decriminalizing drugs, I'm not talking about just letting there be a free-for-all. We're talking about stopping the war on drugs, taking those billions of dollars and spending it on rehabilitation of people that have drug issues, like they've done in Portugal, which is pretty clearly shown that there have been some improvements in society. I think Oregon, the way they did it, they just decriminalized and that was it and left everyone to fend. That's not going to work. The whole idea is you stop the money that we're spending on the police to bust people doing oftentimes unviolent crimes, and you spend it on trying to make them better, get them off the streets and into an apartment. The universal basic income plan is going to feed them and do the other things. So maybe they can start their lives over. And even if they just want to do drugs on their own in their apartment, at least they're not doing it out on the street. It's another idea of mine. It's not that I want to tell people what to do, but I think right now we have this problem where by just decriminalizing something, that doesn't help it. You actually have to take all that saved resources and spend it on improving society, which is exactly what I would do.
So in terms of body modifications that you have done yourself, are there any that you could share on camera and talk about?
Absolutely. So I have a tiny chip implant in my hand. It's literally the size of a grain of rice. You get it injected through a horse syringe, this big syringe, and it's in your fatty tissue, and it does all sorts of things. So for example, on this chip implant in my hand, you can hold Bitcoin. I could send a text message to people with it. So if you come close enough to me with your phone, it sends off a text message. I can also open my front door. So I'm a surfer and a runner, and it's really useful because I never have to carry keys whenever I go anywhere. And you can imagine how nice it is to go jogging without having to carry your car keys or your house keys. So yeah, it opens my front door too.
Who makes this tech?
A lot of people make this tech now. A lot of the tech was created for disabled people, like people with extreme mental issues that wander off. And this way you can both find them and you can also locate their medical information. It's actually just an India. It's kind of like a very similar tag that a lot of house pets also have, except now it's a little bit more sophisticated. It can do all sorts of weird software things. Like I said, send out texts. But I just use it mostly because I can eliminate keys. But you can even do things like, if it's set up properly, like pay at Starbucks and things like that.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Well, thank you so much. This has been an enlightening conversation. I've learned a lot. Thank
Absolutely.
you for making the time.
Thank you.
Great to meet you.
Thank you.